I've been asking myself a lot of questions about survival games recently. What was the first survival game? Was there a precursor to modern survival games? How did we get to a point where survival games feature pet dinosaurs? These questions and more have been burning in my mind for weeks, and I'm making this video to feed the hunger of other like-minded individuals. Today, I want to talk about the history of survival games, or more simply, what led us to the survival games we love today. The year is 1982. The world is full of leg warmers, phones with cords, probably too much neon, and lots of synth pop. Most importantly though, advancements in computer technology have allowed video games to finally enter homes. The Atari 2600 is selling wildly throughout the United States, and along with it is one of the earliest survival games ever made, Survival Island. Don't get me wrong, Survival Island, honestly, sucked. At least by today's standards. I never got the opportunity to play it, but wow, I am glad I didn't. Regardless of how much it sucked, it incorporated hunger and thirst, and that was one of the first times developers started using survival mechanics in actual video games. On the other end of the survival spectrum, in 1985, the Oregon Trail was released to educate players on the way pioneers lived in the 19th century. If you've ever played it, you know that it's actually a pretty tricky game with failure lurking at every stop. Its development actually began in 1971 as an educational game that only students and teachers could access and enjoy. In fact, they enjoyed it so much that developers started working on a public release that, as previously mentioned, was released in 1985. The Oregon Trail proved that gaming could serve a higher purpose. Developers had a quantity over quality mindset, looking to make a quick buck however possible, which was evident in their games. The survival game genre was considered unsuccessful in the 80s, which caused many future survival games to struggle. Games like the Oregon Trail stood out like diamonds in the rough. As leg warmers began to fade out of style, a typical family home in the 90s would sound like, with the occasional, and you could find dedicated gamers playing games like Unreal World and Robinson's Requiem through the noise and chaos. In fact, Unreal World was such a good game that you can play it today on Steam. It's pretty complicated, but it's arguably the first survival game like those we know today. The game offered a challenging open world and other modern survival mechanics like making shelter and fighting hunger. Even though it had a super confusing interface and rudimentary graphics, I feel like it's a damn good game for the limitations developers had to overcome in 1992. Only 2 years later, Robinson's Requiem was released and challenged developers to think of survival games differently. It featured a mechanic that allowed players to amputate limbs as a last-ditch effort to fight infection. I mean, imagine. The game was set in first person and created modern crafting and inventory management systems that are still used today. The 90s were an exciting time for survival games because Unreal World and Robinson's Requiem revitalized the genre. Players and developers finally started looking at survival games with respect. Survival games in the 2000s get a little weird. It's totally understandable too, because the US was obsessed with the first camera phones, Xbox 360s, and badger, mushroom, whatever that was. I think we can all agree that it was a strange time, and regular people were trying their best to fully understand the true capabilities of technology. The new digital world allowed survival game developers to find their creative side and get a little weird. In 2002, Disaster Report hit the PlayStation 2 and attempted to blend action and adventure with survival. Ultimately, the goal was to escape the city while maintaining an ever-draining thirst bar. Did it succeed? That's subjective, but it showed that developers were trying to genuinely make engaging games that players would enjoy. However, not all developers had those good intentions, because The Sims 2 Castaway was basically a more advanced version of Survival Island from the 80s. I can appreciate developers taking an old game and putting a new twist on it, but that one felt like a low-effort money grab. Anyway, there was some real progress to the genre with the release of Stranded in 2003. It was arguably the first survival game that offered base building in a modern sense. Interestingly, it also featured dinosaurs for a single mission. I'm glad Unreal Software tried to tap into a lot of people's childhood love for dinosaurs, and who knows, maybe this was a precursor for Ark Survival Evolved. Regardless, Stranded added something fresh to survival games, and it's obviously had a tremendous effect on the genre. Finally, some good fucking food! Minecraft. It was released in 2011 and took the survival genre by storm. Fortunately, most of us have probably experienced the perfectly executed collection of decades of progress that is Minecraft. It was such an easily accessible and unique game that anyone interested in the genre ended up with Minecraft in their library. Does that mean that Minecraft inspired other games like No Man's Sky and Rust? It's tough to tell, in my opinion. There are so many survival games in history that developers can find inspiration from that saying that Minecraft was the sole inspiration for any single game is probably not quite right. However, the game was undoubtedly pivotal. I'm sure that survival developers today look at Minecraft as the bare minimum though. Even though it was the first wildly successful survival game, it's rather simple. Much of its charm does come from simplicity, but Minecraft provided a sturdy foundation for developers to expand from, no matter how you look at it. We can consider survival game development today as we did in the 2000s, with the wild creativity and experimentation, but the difference is refinement. Survival games today start out much more solid than they would have in the 2000s, for the simple fact that so many others have missed the mark before. And developers have clearly learned from those mistakes because today we have stunning games like Ark and Subnautica. Developers are pushing the creative limits of the survival genre while still keeping things structured, which makes me tremendously hopeful for the future of survival games. What do you think lies ahead for survival games? Let me know your thoughts below, and if you'd like to discuss anything further or want to check on my survival adventures, follow me on Twitter. Thank you so much for your time today, and we'll see you in the next video.